my new little gizmo. Okay, so I've got one of these power meters for running, a Stryd, and you might be asking, well, why have I got one of these? Now, a few things really. I think the first one is so I can use it with testing. So we know that when we're testing, we're looking for, say, some intrinsic markers. We're looking for things like VO2. We're looking for VO2 max, your thresholds, and it's all well good knowing that, but what do you actually get from it? What's the output? And this is really kind of your speed or your pace, what normally that is. So what we'll do is we'll find out, say, your aerobic and your anaerobic threshold, what heart rates are associated with these, and what speeds correlate with these heart rates. So then you know roughly, if you're going to stay looking to do like a zone 2 run, you know what speed you should be going. Now this is really good, but the problem with, say, using just heart rate and or pace is there's always going to be a flaw. So if you're on a track on a treadmill, not so much, but if you're just kind of running out, doing like a zone 2 run, you'll know that it's never just flat. And what happens if you're, say, kind of following a pace guideline, if you start going up a hill, you're going to start trying to push the pace or push the effort to maintain that pace. Same for heart rate as well. I like heart rate for lower zones because if you get to a hill, you start going up. If you're going to have to stay within that kind of zone, so you're going to have to slow down. It's kind of what we want. But then the problems at, say, higher speed, pace can be good again if it's flat, but when it comes to heart rate, we know there's a bit of a lag, say about a minute. So if you're going to do like 3-minute intervals or 2-minute intervals, let's say, if you keep checking your watch, you're not really kind of getting what you want from the session. Well, you still can in a roundabout way, but I think it's not perfect. Whereas if you're kind of using pace, that's probably a little bit better. You know the pace you use to stay for like 4 minutes. If it's like a VO2 max pace, that's good, or 1K pace, 3K pace. But again, the issue with it is if it's not flat, you might be pushing harder than you need to. Whereas something like this, what we can actually do is in real time, we can actually see what your power is. And this is going to be adjusted depending on the terrain, depending on, say, like wind as well. So it's going to be really good to ensure that you're targeting your training to get the proper response. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is I'm injured, okay? I've been injured for about more than that, 3 months now is compartment syndrome. And what I really want to start doing is tracking my improvements. I'm not going to overdo it. And again, one of the great things about this is we can do so for those who use Training Peaks with like a TSS score. What we can do really is just get like a bit of a strain score with your actual running. And again, if you're going to be running on different terrains, sometimes it's difficult to, especially if you're just looking at mileage for the week, we don't always know what, say, the actual strain or the effort that you're putting into some of these runs. Whereas what I can do now with this is actually see how hard I'm training at each run. And then really just by using this, I'm going to be able to look back and see, am I improving? Is there kind of am I overdoing it? And I'm going to reduce the risk of injury, but also just see a nice gradual return back to running. So that's kind of the other reason as well. The other thing is that power's the way forward. I think it's just, I almost 100% guarantee that in 10 years' time, all serious recreational runners are going to be using a power meter. If you just look at cycling, I'm getting really into the cycling at the moment, having that kind of something like a power meter, it just makes your kind of training so much easier. Now, I'm not discrediting the other things, but if you can layer these things on top of one another, you're in for a winner. So if I know my VO2 max, and that kind of intrinsic, I guess, factor, kind of what's my physiology doing, and if I can match it with, say, an output like this, so I know exactly kind of what wattage to follow at different speed, at different zones, is going to make the effectiveness of my training so much more. I don't want to go too much into it yet because I haven't used it. So I'm really just excited just to see how it does actually work. So I'm going to be kind of just documenting kind of what I do. I'm going to go for my first run today. I think, again, I'll document. I don't want to I'll wait until I've actually started getting some data so I can look through it. But really, I kind of think for the first couple of weeks, you can do like a critical power test. Again, I don't want to go into it now. I just bore you because I'm going on enough. But what will they do is they find out your critical power, which is essentially your FTP if you're doing kind of cycling, just by doing some running. So it's going to, their algorithm over time, it's going to start figuring out what my like FTP is. Then based off this, I can do my training zone. So because I can't do a full test at the moment on the gear, on the metabolic cart, I'm just going to start doing like the intro plan, just kind of doing a few kind of plods, a few faster paces, just so they can give me my FTP. And then when I can start getting up to that point where I can do like a full VO2 test, I'll be able to compare the numbers and just lay on top of them. So again, it's going to give me better data, and it's going to make my running a lot better than it is, and it's not really great. So, okay, so I'm going to go for this kind of little plod today, see how I get on, and I'm going to be sharing if it's any good. Right, speak to you later. Right then, okay, so someone's ready to go. Do my first run today. Today's a really easy one. I did a bit of a silly this morning, did the Tour de Swift. It was meant to be top of zone 2, bottom of zone 3. fairly steady ride, obviously turned into a race, pushed myself really hard. So my legs aren't feeling great, but nonetheless, it's an easy session today. So first run with the Stryd. Now the idea with this is that we need to find the critical power. So based on the critical power, this is essentially your FTP if it comes to cycling, and that's going to help us determine our training zones. To get the critical power, you can either do a test. However, given my leg, it's probably not a good idea. The other way you can do it is let them auto-generate it based off a number of different runs. So you would have to do some speed work, some hard work, some easy work, and then based off this, they can kind of auto-generate it. This is quite good for me as well, because they do like a little plan where they progress through some of these types of runs. So at the end of the plan, one, I'm going to start understanding the data, which is obviously really important, but also I'm going to get this score at the end. And hopefully, looking at the leg, if it kind of works, if it improves even, then off the back of this, I can start kind of programming some proper runs anyway. So let's see how I go. Muddy terrain today. So yeah, let's just see how it goes. See you in a bit.
Right then, okay, so what have we got? To be honest, at the moment, this isn't going to mean much because, as I mentioned in the previous video, it's going to take a bit of time really for this to mean anything at all. I actually quite like this dashboard. So what we can see is the power up here. You've got your heart rate and pace. And what I can see so far is they've generated. I'm in the way. My powers are. I think this is just for this run. But what I did was fairly steady for the first bit of quick work here, and again, steady. To be honest, it's just a bog today. It was ridiculous. But what's going to be interesting, again, with this stuff, you have to look back. I think it's the one bit of data is not going to give us much. But really interesting to say, like, running slightly uphill in mud, that I'm producing what at the moment, say, 280, 300 watts of power. Whereas here, when I was running relatively fast, well, 6-minute miles, 5-minute miles, you're talking only about 400 watts of power. So it's not actually that much. It just shows really how much terrain does alter the kind of your workload. And I think this is going to be really important for setting race times, because if you know you have to hold a certain amount of watts to hit a certain time for a race, you can make sure that you pull back or push harder on certain efforts, and how many times you try to stay in a pace on a hill and it just completely buggers you. So interesting stuff. Actually, it's not that interesting. It just got me intrigued. I just want to be able to run more. So it's going to take a kind of couple of weeks really for this to mean much, but I'm going to document it all and my cycling just to bore everyone with my endurance journey. Right, enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Where's the camera? Speak to you soon.